Welcome, everyone. My name is Brandon, your trusted realtor, and I am here with the Realty DMV. I'd like to welcome Dr. Wesley Willis. He is the creator of The Nurse Doc. You can find his channel on YouTube. There'll be a link down below in the comment section, so you can check that out and follow along there. And he's also a practitioner as well. So welcome, Dr. Wesley Willis. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for inviting me on. I really feel privileged to be a part of, your experience with the Realty DMV.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate you making time for me. So, I want to dive right in because you are in New York and you are really in the heart of things as it relates to COVID-19. And people who are sick can't pay their mortgage, and we're finding that there's a real direct relationship between, what is going on with COVID-19 and healthcare and people's livelihood altogether. So before we dive into that, give me a little bit and give us a little bit of information about you, your background. Tell us a little bit about yourself and about your channel.
Cool. So, yep. So educationally, I am a registered nurse, a licensed clinical social worker, and a licensed psychologist. I hold a PhD in psychology, a master's in social work, and a bachelor's in nursing. A lot of my work, both on and off of the air, is centered around mental health and well-being. So that's a lot of what my channel is about the well-being, conversations, dialogue with specialists in different areas, just kind of like to help us all live better lives and kind of like view the world in a very healthy perspective. So that's what my channel is a lot about. I also work a lot with couples. So that's been like what my focus has really truly been on in my private practice. And I also still work at the bedside here in New York City at different varying hospitals. So yeah, that's a bit about me.
You are more than a little bit busy, I would say.
I love it though. I need it.
So thanks for that. How long have you been in New York?
Wow. Um, so York on and off. Uh, so for over like 18 years almost.
Okay. Okay. So New York is this, just as I like to classify it, the city of renters. I was
Mhm.
talking to a friend of mine and I met 10 years ago. He lives in New York and we were just catching up and he was like, "Oh yeah, I saw that you sent me a real estate text. Sorry, I didn't respond to that." And he was like, "Oh yeah." And I was like, "Yeah, you still stay in the same place?" He was like, "I still stay in the exact same place. It's rent control. I pay what, $1,400, and I'm like,
Mhm.
he's like at 125th and like Nicholas or something like that.
Right,
So
right.
like he's like in the heart of, I'm gonna get like Manhattan. Is that right?
Well, Harlem, yes.
Harlem. So he's like in the heart of Harlem, and I'm just like, so are you? To my question, are you renting? Or are you, right, as I lament, right,
Right,
at my DC mortgage? Are you renting or are you owning in New York?
right.
Currently?
So I rent in New York. I mean, one of the things I think is funny because my aunt and I had this conversation many years ago is to own a piece of New York City dirt is, don't get me wrong, a very something that you want to tout, but at the same time, it's just an investment. And while I love this city, I actually can't see myself living outside of New York City. I also know that realistically, I want to call somebody and say, "Hey, I need you to come change this light bulb."
Yeah.
I don't want that kind of responsibility. I want a super to like go outside when it's cold outside and there's snow outside and have to shovel and salt. I don't want to do it. So, hey, I'm a renter.
Yeah, yeah, and there's most certainly nothing wrong with that because I think
Right,
that becomes when I always talk to my clients when it comes to making the decision whether you want to rent or you want to buy. Is that regardless of what you make, is that it's an extremely personal decision to you, and you have to
right,
make the decision based on your lifestyle. And
right.
that's one of the advantages of New York is that, I mean, where else can you really go in the nation where it's things are going to be rent controlled, and really the cost of living, the cost to buy in New York City property is so just astronomical that
Yes.
it can be a little bit cost prohibitive to get into it. So it makes complete sense.
Hmm.
Um, so let's shift gears a little bit and let's talk about your professional life, your life as a healthcare provider in the trenches. Talk to me about some of the things, or talk to us about some of the things that you are seeing that are going on in the hospitals now.
Uh, I mean, I've been in healthcare for over 17 years, and it's nothing like I've ever experienced or ever imagined that I would live through. I think that it has poked holes in kind of like what we already know is kind of a broken system, but we've always been able to patch it together. Like, in terms of limited ventilators, in terms of limited ICU beds, in terms of limited this, but we've always been able to patch it together in healthcare. And now with this just new pandemic that just blindsided all of us, it's really brought a lot of things to light. Like one, I know there was a conversation with the mayor of Illinois or Chicago, and talking just about like the disparity of like wealth and healthcare. Like, so while 10 Black people or people of color in poor communities may contract or become, coronavirus positive versus 20, Caucasian people, more than likely 15 of those Caucasian people have access to good health care and access to the stuff that they need to get better. But high proportionately, the people of color, like 9 of those 10, are not going to have those same type of access. So they're like, oh well, it's ravaging, the Black community and poor Black communities. And that's just what we're honestly seeing. I mean, you have to be able to get those things, like, even though they're still experimental. I mean, you think about who has been on Plaquenil or the like that. I've been on anti-malaria medications, but then how many Black people have really truly been on anti-malarial medications just, randomly? So stuff like that, again, when you think about now all the practitioners were all virtual. So you think about like the average Black person who already doesn't have like a primary care doctor that they could say, hey, can I see you on Zoom? I'm having these kind of symptoms. They're going to have to go to the emergency room where they've been going for their primary care. And they're also going to get met with, the fact that the emergency room is full of individuals who are experiencing exacerbated or the extreme symptoms of coronavirus or COVID. So, yeah, I mean, that's what
Everything
I'm
else
seeing.
still goes on. Like other healthcare issues don't stop because coronavirus is reared its head. Like,
Exactly. People are still having heart
bigger
attacks and stuff
yeah.
like that.
Wow. So and that only increases their exposure. So you actually hit
Yes.
on the point. So I'd be interested to maybe, I don't even know if it's plain devil's advocate, but to pose a question to you.
Mhm.
When you look at individuals and we talk about the health disparity, I find that a lot of the disparity comes with individuals that have made a certain type of investment in their community. And more times than not, you find that people who are homeowners have actually made that investment. Are you seeing with the cases of coronavirus that some of the individuals are more like upstate and they have more access and they're homeowners and versus people who live in more of the city? Or
Plains devil's advocate and seeing kind of like what those disparities are. I'll be quite honestly, I will just speak honest from what my experience is. I know Black people in who are professionals, licensed social workers, registered nurses who are house poor in New York City. They made the sacrifice, and they have like $200-300 a month extra
Mhm.
to do other stuff with, because they wanted to own a brownstone or they wanted to do those other stuff, that they still are in the same boat compared to individuals of color who weren't doing that well financially, versus like again, our Caucasian counterparts who have houses, maybe even in the same area, still have ac- access to better, to different levels of money or wealth. Is you get what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah. And and that definitely makes a lot of sense. I think that there's also there's a term in real estate that I use when I talk to people about leveraging their available programs or options, and it's called stacking. And if I'm hearing correctly, if I'm hearing what you're saying, one of the opportunities is that a lot of folks that maybe are making the sacrifice to purchase a property in a geographic area that's expensive, but as a result of buying that property, they don't have enough of an income left over or residual income left over where they are comfortable, or they're basically paying more in their mortgage payment than they were
Mhm.
in their rent,
Right,
almost essentially would
exactly.
be encapsulated. And have they ever thought about combining or leveraging their worth? So as we talk about New York, I think about Little Italy and Chinatown and these
Hmm.
segments and communities. And other cultures have different ways of living and compartmentalizing themselves and their money and their resources to get to a place where they can then achieve not only combined but individual kind of financial independence. Do you, do you think that that would be something or strategy that could be advantageous of that brown? Because brownstones are pretty big. If I
They are big. I mean, my uncle owns one. And he's a multimillionaire, and he got it when it was worth 20. When New York City was giving away in the 70s for $20,000, but there were also crackheads sleeping on his stoop. You know, you. I think that there are just really honest, great moments in American history where people jump on great deals, and it turns out to be like this really exponential growth. And then you have like those really tough times, which is what we're experiencing, is where you really have to just say, let me see, the advantage in like being uncomfortable. I think honestly, just kind of thinking about myself and thinking about kind of like what you're talking about is like you have to be with a level of uncomfortability. Like, say, for instance, oh, I own a 3-story brownstone, but I have to rent out 2 stories. Do I really want that? But no, I don't want to have to deal with that. Now I got a house and now I have to share it with somebody else, or or different stuff of that nature. I think that I'm just thinking from just speaking from my own personal as in black man from the South, just thinking about it, you think, do I really need 3 floors to myself? But we view
question.
uh stuff and our access to our stuff in a very different way than like other cultures, like who are willing to say, oh yeah, we'll live, I'll have a 2-3 bedroom, and I'll put those 2 or 3 bedrooms on an Airbnb, and this be my condo or my co-op, and I live in 1 bedroom and host two, and then get to that point. I don't think that we think like that, or we don't view that as being a comfortable situation.
Yeah. And that goes back to thinking about more of your home as in the process and being able to split it from being just a personal transaction
Mm-hmm.
and also thinking about your home as the asset that it truly is, right? And
Exactly.
the
Exactly.
advantage of that. And I also heard what I think is a really good point, which is making sure you're considerate of whether or not what I always like to say, the juice worth the squeeze, or is this the right amount of house for me, right? Do I
Mm-hmm.
really need 3 levels? Because when I think of brownstone, I think of Crooklyn, and I think of having to go up the spiral staircase and the 3 or 4 different levels, and each level having like 3 different rooms, and each room having this like own fireplace, just like massive
Right.
for no, just
Exactly.
in my mind for no reason, but just massive, just a massive amount of space. Um, but yeah, thinking about the home as an asset, and I think that becomes with that having that asset becomes thinking about it differently on how to leverage it and how to gain access. But that also kind of, I think, pivots us a little bit, is as it relates to COVID-19 and living
Hmm.
in kind of the city that rents, right? Probably has like the highest renters per capita in the country. Probably the
Undoubtedly.
exception of, yeah, with the exception of
Next
probably
to San Francisco,
San Francisco.
probably.
Yeah. Um, how do you find in these times in that environment the concept of communal living or shared space? Like that, I look at renting in different phases. There's like renting when you're in Atlanta, and I rented, but my building had four. It had six units in it. That was it. And then you had to go to the next building to get to the next six units, right? And my neighbors knew each other, whereas that's not necessarily going to be the case in
Hmm. Hmm.
New York.
Well, I think, anecdotally, I mean, just historically, New York has been one of those places where people, it's a young city. Let's just be honest. And when you have a pretty young city, you have people who are willing to, list or go in together who are not familial or not from the same family background and get a two-bedroom or get a one-bedroom and turn the living room into, a bedroom, yada, yada, yada. And that's just really me speaking anecdotally,
Mhm.
that even in this particular time, I mean, I have patients who come in. Actually, my practice is really, really, really gone bananas because I'm a virtual health practitioner. So I see patients, so they don't come into the office to see me. And just honestly, some of the new patients have come in and said, "Hey, I have three roommates, and if I get positive or they get positive, where are they going to go, or where am I going to go?" Uh, and I think that, and those people are millennials. So yeah, I think that given this COVID-19 and coronavirus, I mean, I think it definitely is playing a part in their mindset. But at the same time, it's like, well, where do I go? I can't, pick up and go, get my own apartment.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. Do you feel like that also, from a mental health standpoint, impacts anxiety? Right. And so now we're in this current situation. Is kind of what are you seeing now? You talked about the health piece, but what about the anxiety piece, the mental health standpoint? How do you
Yeah.
what are you seeing there? And I think you touched on that a little bit. And what would you recommend to people who are dealing with that situation? How do they begin to cope with things like that?
I think that, uh, given whatever your living situation is, you have to really decide. No matter what, I think that communication is huge. Whether you live in an apartment, with two other people and you all have really kind of coexisted together, but you really don't talk to one another, you got to sit down and take this very serious. Like, say, hey, you know, if you feel symptoms, you, I won't say owe it to us, but you should let somebody in the house know so that we know how to manage, like, eating utensils, touching doorknobs,
Right.
and being in the same space together safely. We're not saying you have to go, but we are saying that out of respect for our living quarters and out of respect for a situation that all of us chose to live in, please make us aware, if you're not feeling the best. Or so I think that that's one thing, that will help deal with kind of like that anxiety. Also, just at the same time, just say, hey, these are some new practices within our, within our living quarters, and this is how we should kind of treat this, as opposed to, not really thinking about it and not really talking about it.
Yeah, and I think that's huge, which is being aware and being conscious of other people is what I heard you say, and making sure you communicate because regardless of whatever your housing status is, whether you're a renter or a buyer, and if
Mhm.
there's just you and multiple people living in the house, there has to be an open line of communication to make sure that all parties have a sense of being comfortable and so that we can all respect each other's level of anxiety.
Right.
So that definitely plays a part in it. So I want to pivot. I want to pivot from New York because I know New York has 4,000 cases, and I almost feel like in America, like we got
Trust
like
me,
the
more than
tail
that.
Yeah, and I was thinking, well, I heard 4,000 cases today, and I was just like, that sounds low, but
Yeah, no, so I mean, just in kind of like Queens alone, they have over 20,000 cases, which is some of the which is one of the which is a borough that's the hardest hit. Currently, right now, I can tell you the number that New York City has 77,967 cases of confirmed positive and 3,602 deaths
wow.
to date.
And that's just and what
That's New
do
York
you feel
City.
like, and that's New York City. And what do
Five
you feel like?
boroughs.
Yeah, yeah, that's and that's insane. Like 77,000 people and 3,000, almost 4,000 deaths.
Hmm.
Um, are you all finding any kind of leading contributors? Like, are people adhering to the Surgeon General, who I did not realize, sidebar, I did not, maybe my head was under sand, but that that young fella came on and I was like, oh, we all need to be listening to whatever he said. Um,
Right.
and so, are you finding just in your observations as a medical
Hmm.
professional, people are monitoring social distancing in New York because it's a city that rents, but it's also the city that never sleeps.
Right. Right. It's, New York City is a restless. I think that we're struggling probably more so while people I think outside of New York City are struggling equally as much. The gravity of what we experience is just unfortunately impossible. We have no choice. There's so many of us in such a very small space that that such a quick adjustment is still challenging.
Yeah,
Just just a week or so ago, there was a bar mitzvah held, and again, even though we know the number of cases of people who are passing, they still held the bar mitzvah. And so many of the people there got sick and are in the hospital. Several have died. People still having weddings in New York City, not like in the backwoods of somewhere else, but like in a time where
yeah.
we really need to just be putting things aside. People are still finding workarounds. It's just I think New York City is just having a tough time with it. New York City is really having a tough time with it.
Yeah.
With conceiving, you know, just how really impacted we are.
And just staying in place, I can imagine
Right.
too, because apartments aren't huge in New York.
Right.
I mean, some of them are pretty spacious, and everyone is not fortunate to have a brownstone.
Hmm.
But how many times can you walk around? How, can you go from your bedroom to the kitchen, right?
Right. Exactly.
So I want to shift gears a little bit and just talk to you about your international exposure. So you are a bit of a traveler. I think your middle name, if I'm not mistaken, is
Right.
so. I think you came back. You just had a birthday not too long ago,
Hmm.
and you were in Africa, South Africa, if I'm not mistaken, right? And I
Yes.
want to say
Yes.
you kind of left at like the tail end of maybe a wave before it even kind of, I think it was still in China and kind of things
Hmm.
were ramping up before it even kind of, it was still in Wuhan and think before things kind of pushed its way here. Now, with your global network and your contacts, what has the discussion been as far as those folks and their experience as it relates to COVID and the
Hmm.
impact it's playing on them and their kind of different homeowners, renter communities, etc.
Is so funny. Yes, you're right. I had just left. We think actually that the first cases of coronavirus and COVID-19, as it is at present, was here. Before December. So that's just the honest truth about it. But yes, I was in South Africa in January, the tail end of January, coming back in February. And from what I'm just talking with like a lot of people there, I'm so connected globally. They're really, again, my friends in South Africa are quarantined or required to stay home. My friends who are in Ghana are required to stay home, and they are again, it's not as as significant there in terms of the number of cases, but they are kind of like having the conversation about it. My friends, of course, as you know, in Italy, were are ravaged, devastated, just still kind of like in the throes of figuring out where family members were or are or their bodies are and different stuff of that nature.
So yeah, and it can only be difficult to say the least.
Hmm.
How have you found compared to the international reaction? Have you found that your friends have indicated that they are actually more compliant than your New York counterparts, or do you find that the response kind of is the same
I
in
think the
those small
response
pockets?
I think the response is the same. I think they are just when I think about just kind of like the conversations dialogue that I'm having with South Africans and with my network of people outside of the United States is still kind of like, where did this come from? How did this happen? I'm not ready to make this adjustment. And in some ways, I still need to continue to live, and try to figure this thing out the best of what works for me. Uh, because which is what we realize is just honestly, you have to make a complete drastic 180-degree change in the way that we've always been taught. Like, be social, connect with people. You want to do those things, build a family, build a network of people so you can feel supported, and that helps you have better mental health, better physical health. And now it's like, no, you can't go to yoga. No, you can't go to a concert with your friend. No, you can't have a housewarming. No, you can't. And it's like, but that's what we were told that we needed to do to be
Right,
happy and healthy. So,
right.
they're struggling with it just like we are.
Okay. Well, awesome. Well, this has been great. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today and to spend a little bit of time talking about your experiences with COVID-19 and how it is impacting everyone, not just renters there, but no one's really
No,
safe, regardless where you are. So continue to be vigilant. Thank you so much for your work and for those up to the minute statistics here on the Real T. Remember, I'll leave your information down below, but remember, subscribe because there's no greater appreciation and show of love than a subscription. So thank you guys so much for joining the Real T DMV. This is Dr. Wesley Willis. I'm your trusted realtor, Brandon Scott, and until next time, take care and be well.
have an amazing day.